In other news and overseas tonight, an American aircraft carrier and 3 destroyers have arrived in the Middle East.
The Pentagon now says a U.S. Navy destroyer shot down several missiles and drones that were launched from Yemen.
We have only just begun to fight, and fight decisively.
217 hours, Central Persian Gulf. T-minus 3 minutes until impact. 6 missiles. More than 4,500 Americans in the strike group's orbit. Every second counts. This is the story of 42 minutes that nearly lit the Gulf on fire. A few moments earlier, the water had looked almost peaceful. Black glass under a moonless sky, warm wind skimming the flight deck. The kind of night where the Persian Gulf seems to hold its breath. Then the illusion breaks. At the center of that darkness sits USS Gerald R. a 100,000-ton nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, 1,092 feet of steel, jet fuel, radar energy, and compressed violence. Around her, the screen is tight and disciplined. Aegis-equipped destroyers pushing radar coverage deep into the horizon, electronic warfare aircraft on alert, helicopters cycling over the water. Watch teams staring into consoles that never blink. This is not just a ship. It is a moving airbase, a sovereign slab of American power, carrying a full air wing and enough combat capability to rewrite any regional commander's math in a single night. And where is it operating? The Persian Gulf, the funnel leading toward the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most strategically significant waterways on Earth. Oil tankers, gas carriers, warships, surveillance aircraft, civilian traffic, fishing dhows, patrol craft. Everyone squeezed into a body of water where one bad decision can become a global crisis before sunrise. Imagine you're here now. You can smell hydraulic fluid and hot metal. You can hear the low growl of generators below deck. Somewhere in the darkness, watchstanders are joking quietly to stay awake. Somewhere else, Anya pilot is trying to drink bad coffee before a possible scramble. None of them know the next 4 minutes will define the rest of their careers. In this hypothetical scenario, tensions with Iran have been building for days. Merchant shipping has reported aggressive harassment. U.S. surveillance has picked up unusual movement among Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force units along the northern Gulf coastline. Dispersed transporter-erector launchers have slipped in and out of hardened sites near Bandar Abbas, the Bushehr corridor, and launch boxes farther inland. American analysts know the pattern. More importantly, they know the timing. Pressure creates impatience. Impatience creates mistakes. Tehran's gamble is brutal in its simplicity. Hit the carrier, not necessarily to sink it outright, just wound it, burn the deck. Kill enough sailors, shake global markets, prove that the most advanced navy on Earth can be touched inside the Gulf. 6 Al-Qadr medium-range ballistic missiles, modified in this fictional scenario for maritime targeting, are assigned to the strike. 2 from the northeast axis, 2 from the central northern coast, 2 from the northwest approach, 3 directions, multiple trajectories, a compressed timeline. The theory is that saturation and geometry will fracture the American defense picture long enough for at least one warhead to get through. From the enemy's perspective, it almost looks elegant. Ballistic speed, simultaneous launch windows, drone and coastal sensor queuing, civilian maritime clutter below, a narrow sea box limiting maneuver room for a carrier the size of a small city. They believe they have found the moment when size becomes a liability. They believe surprise can offset the technological gap. They believe political shock is more important than military efficiency. And for a brief moment, in the hardened rooms where launch orders are confirmed, they believe history is about to bend in their direction. But there's a problem with their plan. What they didn't account for was not just American firepower, it was American information dominance. The sensor web is bigger than the Gulf. It starts above the atmosphere, moves through regional command networks, runs across ships, aircraft, and data links, and ends with human beings trained to turn blips into decisions under impossible pressure. Iran is planning a missile strike. The United States is already building the kill chain to break it. Could you make that call with seconds evaporating? Could you trust a glowing symbol on a screen enough to fire millions of dollars in interceptors into the night? That's where this becomes real for the people involved. Not in speeches, not in headlines, in a dark combat information center with adrenaline surging and somebody saying very calmly, "Confirmed launch." The first detection comes from space. Infrared early warning satellites pick up the launch plumes almost immediately, 6 hard flashes burning out of the Iranian night. Seconds later, the data slams into regional command networks. Track correlation begins. The geometry is ugly. but the signature is unmistakable. Ballistic. At 0217 and 14 seconds, the composite picture sharpens. At 0217 and 22 seconds, the carrier strike group receives threat warning. At 0217 and 31 seconds, Ford's general quarters alarm erupts through the ship. Now you're there. The calm is gone. Red lights, hatches slamming, boots hammering steel ladders. On the flight deck, crews sprint to lock down equipment and clear launch lanes. In the Combat Information Center, voices tighten, but they do not rise. No panic, no theatrics, just compressed professionalism. One officer is tracking inbound arcs. Another is checking identification confidence. Another is pushing engagement authority up and down the chain simultaneously because there is no time for clean paperwork when 6 ballistic tracks are descending toward a carrier. Escort destroyers begin their own choreography. Aegis combat systems are already solving intercept windows. Radars cut through the night, building and refining tracks with machine precision. An E-2D Hawkeye, orbiting farther out, adds airborne perspective to the picture. Electronic warfare teams begin hunting for supporting emissions, drones, decoys, anything that might be helping the strike. Fighters on alert are turned toward threat sectors, not because they can dogfight ballistic missiles, but because in modern war, the missile is rarely alone. It has eyes, it has spotters, it has a network. Break the network and you blind the shot. At 0218, the first American interceptors leave their cells. The night changes shape. Missile launch at sea is violent in a way cameras never fully capture. Vertical launch system hatches snap open and columns of fire punch upward from the destroyers, bright enough to stain the clouds orange. One missile, then another, then a ripple, then a wall. The carrier does not move fast enough to run. It survives by trusting the layers around it. High tier first. The 2 lofted threats from the northeast axis are climbing on the cleanest ballistic arcs, and that gives the defenders opportunity. Aegis ships on the eastern screen commit long-range interceptors upward. The engagement window is short, but not impossible. The combat system has already done the cold math. Angle, speed, predicted descent basket, probability of kill. The order goes out. 2 interceptors for each threat. No half measures. If you're the sailor watching that screen, this is the worst kind of waiting. You've already acted. Now physics decides whether you live. The first intercept happens so high it looks almost unreal from the deck below. A white flash against black sky, silent for a heartbeat before the faint delayed rumble rolls across the water. The 1 inbound gone. Fragments scatter into the upper atmosphere like sparks from a grinder. 4 seconds later, the second bloom. 2 down. But there is no relief because the next 4 are already bending lower and faster, using depressed trajectories meant to compress reaction time. This is the heart of Iran's gamble. They thought the first pair would consume the longest-range intercepts and clutter the picture. They thought the lower flyers might slip through the seam while attention stayed high. A fatal miscalculation. The American defense isn't a single wall. It's a staircase. Mid-layer now. 2 destroyers cross-assigned targets, one using the clearer radar solution from the western side of the formation, the other taking the central tracks. More interceptors launch. This time the shots are flatter, faster, more urgent. But the Aegis combat system is no longer just predicting arcs. It is hunting terminal baskets. SM-6 missiles climb, roll, and spear out into the darkness, guided by shipboard radar and their own seekers in the final moments. The sky above the Gulf becomes a calculated demonstration of modern air and missile defense. No wasted motion, no cinematic chaos, just a chain of machines and humans performing exactly as trained while death closes at several thousand miles per hour. One of the central axis threats begins to maneuver in terminal phase. That is the nightmare in this fictional scenario. A ballistic missile that doesn't descend obediently is a problem that gets people promoted if they solve it, and memorialized if they don't. The track wobbles, updates flood the net, recalculation, commit second salvo. On it, re-engage! Another pair of interceptors erupts upward. On Ford's deck, sailors can't see the data. They only see flashes, exhaust, and distant streaks tearing the night open. Heart pounding. This is real. Somewhere below them, magazines, fuel, aircraft, and thousands of lives sit one successful enemy shot away from catastrophe. The third inbound dies first. A hard white detonation at altitude. Debris fanning out wide. Kill confirmed. The fourth survives the initial intercept attempt by less than a second. That is how thin modern war can be. Less than a second. The first American shot misses by geometry, not by malfunction. The warhead keeps descending. Now the formation tightens emotionally, if not physically. You can feel it in every compartment. Every person knows one leaker is still too many. A second SM-6 launches, then another. Radar track quality stabilizes. The warhead is lower now, hotter, faster, and far too close for comfort. One of the destroyers to Ford's starboard quarter commits. The intercept comes at brutal range. A flash, a split. Then a jagged rain of metal and burning fragments spills outward and downward, some of it hissing into the sea less than 1,000 yards from the carrier's perimeter. 4 down, 2 to go. And now comes the most dangerous part of the entire battle. Not because the missiles are bigger, because time is shorter. The final pair is descending from the northwest and north in a pincer meant to force the carrier to split its final defensive attention. This is the three-direction concept at work. Not a storm by volume, a storm by geometry. Iran's commanders believe that even a world-class defense can only face one knife at a time. Now they are about to learn that a carrier strike group is built precisely for this moment. Ford turns slightly, not to outrun the threat, but to optimize relative geometry for the screen and preserve maneuver room. The escorts maintain their lanes. Electronic warfare aircraft push interference against possible targeting support. Fighters are vectored toward suspicious airborne contacts feeding the battle space. In the larger picture, the Americans are not just shooting missiles. They are erasing the enemy's ability to see. The fifth inbound enters the defended footprint and gets bracketed instantly. 2 terminal interceptors rise from opposite sectors, a cross-angle trap. One misses close, the second does not. It hits with surgical violence. There is no movie fireball, just an abrupt, savage unmaking. The track disappears. And the operators do not cheer. They are already staring at the last symbol. That final missile is the one everyone remembers. It rides lower than expected, faster than comfort allows, shedding velocity as it dives but still carrying enough kinetic energy to ruin steel, ignite aviation fuel, and turn a flight deck into a crematorium. This is the scenario every Navy fears. One surviving inbound, seconds from impact, every layer behind it already expended in somebody else's defense. Could you stand on that deck and not look up? Could you keep doing your job while knowing something from beyond the horizon might arrive before your next breath? That is the human dimension hidden inside phrases like layered defense and integrated air picture. At extreme terminal range, the final intercept sequence begins. Another standard missile rises. Close-in defenses prepare for debris and any surviving fragments. Tracers from the last protective layer slash into the darkness not to duel the warhead at range, but to shred whatever falls through. Then the sky rips open. The last Al-Qadr is hit, not high and clean, but late and violent. The warhead body breaks apart above the strike group. Shards and burning fragments rain down in a screaming arc. One section splashes off the port bow, another punches into the water beyond the screen. Smaller debris peppers the sea around Ford like iron hail. A fragment the size of a locker door skids across part of the outer deck edge and spins into darkness. No catastrophic hit, no burning carrier, no triumphant footage for enemy propaganda. Just salt spray, smoke, alarms. And the sudden realization that 6 ballistic missiles have failed to achieve strategic effect. Final defensive tally: 6 launched, 6 defeated, 1 dangerously late, 0 mission kill on the carrier, and at 0222, less than 5 minutes after the first launch plume was detected, the American response begins. This is where the scenario changes from survival to punishment. The authorization moves fast because the facts are clear. This was not harassment, not probing fire, not an ambiguous radar lock or a drone buzz. It was a coordinated ballistic missile strike on a U.S. carrier strike group inside one of the most sensitive waterways on Earth. The legal, operational, and political thresholds collapse into one answer: self-defense and immediate suppression of further attacks. While Iran believed it was creating shock, the United States is already constructing a counterstrike across domains. The first wave is maritime. Destroyers that spent the last minutes saving the carrier now pivot from defense to offense. Tomahawk cruise missiles launch in disciplined succession toward the coast. Radar sites, missile support nodes, command relays, and launch control infrastructure tied to the attack. To the enemy, the transition is horrifying. One moment they are waiting to see whether their strike succeeded. The next, their own screens fill with inbound tracks. The second wave is airborne. Alert aircraft on Ford surge into action. F/A-18E/F Super Hornets roll into launch sequence with anti-radiation missiles, standoff precision weapons, and the simple mission of taking apart the architecture that enabled the attack. EA-18G Growlers go with them. Because destroying a launcher matters, but blinding the network matters more. And E-2D expands the picture overhead, turning scattered American actions into a single coordinated execution. And yes, execution is the right word. Not rage, not revenge. Execution, cold, methodical, doctrinal. From the enemy's view, the illusion collapses in minutes. The launch crews who thought geography protected them discover that fixed and semi-fixed support assets die first. Coastal radar emissions flare, then vanish. Over-the-horizon targeting links drop, data pathways go dark. A support site near the northern littoral erupts under cruise missile impact. A second facility farther west loses power, communications, and command continuity in one sequence. Mobile launchers that survived the initial salvos try to displace. But movement in a surveillance-rich environment is not concealment. It is a confession. Additional U.S. assets in the wider theater begin feeding the response. Tankers support extended flight time. Regional command centers deconflict airspace. Intelligence platforms update target quality in real time. This is the piece people often miss. Modern retaliation is not one giant explosion. It is a technological purge carried out by linked systems at machine speed. Within the first 10 minutes of the counterstrike, 3 launch support areas are hit. Within 15, 2 coastal sensor nodes are gone. Within 22, a command relay complex associated in this fictional scenario with the strike coordination chain is burning. Secondary detonations begin to appear at one hardened storage location, like suggesting missile components or fuel handling gear inside. Not a battle, not a test, an elimination of capability. Iran's political objective had been immediate. Wound the carrier, force hesitation, dominate the news cycle by dawn. Instead, the strategic result is inverted. Their 6-missile gamble exposes launch corridors, emissions discipline, command relationships, and response latency. They wanted spectacle. They generated targetable signatures. Could the United States have escalated even harder? Absolutely. Carrier warfare is never just the carrier. It is the submarines no one sees, the bombers that may be hours away, the bases already on alert, the alliances measuring every radar pulse across the region. But in this hypothetical scenario, the 5-minute response is designed not as total war, but as overwhelming suppression. Not break the hand that reached for the strike, then make sure it cannot reach again before sunrise. By minute 28, surviving Iranian units are dispersing under electronic attack, uncertain which links still work and which orders are real. By minute 33, the American strike package is hunting remnant air defense emitters and any mobile missile elements still radiating. By minute 38, battle damage assessment indicates the initial attack architecture has been systematically erased. Launch support, target queuing, command coordination, and immediate reload potential all degraded or destroyed. And through all of it, Ford remains on station. Think about that. The very platform Iran chose for symbolic humiliation is still operating, still launching aircraft. Ike's still controlling the tempo of the fight from the same body of water Tehran hoped to dominate. Less than an hour after 6 ballistic missiles came from 3 directions. The carrier is not fleeing. It is orchestrating the response. At 02:59, 42 minutes after the first launch detection, the opening combat cycle is effectively over. Here is the aftermath in hard numbers. 6 Al-Qadr missiles launched. 6 defeated before they could mission kill the carrier. 1 dangerously late intercept producing minor fragment effects, but no catastrophic strike. No loss of the carrier. No loss of combat capability. On the American side in this fictional scenario, a handful of sailors suffer minor injuries during emergency actions and fragment-related incidents. The air wing remains operational. The escorts remain operational. The command and control remains intact. On the Iranian side, the immediate price is far heavier. 3 launch-related support sites destroyed, 2 coastal radar or targeting nodes knocked out, 1 command relay complex eliminated, 1 storage facility left burning under secondary explosions, multiple mobile elements forced into blind displacement. The attack lasted minutes. The consequences lasted the rest of the night. And that is the real lesson. The decisive advantage in modern naval warfare is not just who has the bigger missile or the louder slogan. It is who sees first, links faster, decides cleaner, and fires across layers without losing coherence. Iran's six-missile strike was built on strategic miscalculation, the belief that complexity would paralyze a carrier strike group. Instead, complexity was the Americans' natural environment. They did not need perfect certainty. They needed enough certainty, fast enough, across enough systems to turn 6 inbound threats into 6 failures. 42 minutes, less time than a movie episode, less time than most people spend commuting to work. In that window, a supercarrier was targeted, a layered defense was tested, and an entire attack network was taken apart piece by piece. So, what does this reveal about future conflicts? That the side-chasing symbolism can get annihilated by the side-mastering integration. That one dramatic strike means nothing if the enemy keeps the network, the discipline, and the initiative. And that, in a battle space like the Persian Gulf, every radar pulse, every launch plume, every delayed decision can trigger a chain no one can stop once it starts. How does this change your view of modern warfare? Share your take. Subscribe to join the discussion.